Hey, Ted, thanks for joining us today. As a way of getting started, give us a little background on yourself.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me, Brian. My name's Ted Wilson. I'm in Austin, Texas. So I'm an account executive with a company called SoftServe. So we are a technology consulting and software engineering services company. And I've been here about 6 years, and I was born and raised on the East Coast. I went to school in Texas, played some baseball, and have been in sales ever since.
And why sales for you?
Partly because they gave me a job out of
Among the array of opportunities facing you.
Exactly. I graduated with a literature degree, so I realized quickly that meant very little in the business world at first, anyway.
Yeah.
No, but in all honesty, I think why sales for me, there's a lot of the culture of succeeding in sports translating over to succeeding in sales, and that at least is a great foundation early in your sales career.
Yeah. Oh, what sport was your favorite?
Baseball.
Yeah. And what position?
Catcher.
Okay.
So you're the quarterback of your deal. For me, you're the catcher of your deal, right? That's the analogy there.
Yeah, you're kind of the last line of defense.
Exactly.
Yeah. And how long did it take before you got comfortable in sales? Because, a literature degree didn't really prepare you for much, did it? Other than teaching English, I guess.
Yeah, no, I think actually the transition was very smooth and very quick. And what I found is I've always been in B2B sales, right? My first gig was in New York City as more or less with a startup. So at the time, this was 15 or 20 years ago, but at the time they were focused on revolutionizing the way that the news media globally digested information coming out from the corporate PR world, but in the form of streaming video. Okay. So at the time, getting these really big, robust streaming video files transferred correctly over the internet was a kind of a new technology. And then from there, going into much more services-driven sales for a Fortune 50 company here in Austin, and then here at SoftServe today. I think in B2B, creativity for me has always been much more paramount to my success than any sort of technical playbook or sales training playbook for me personally.
And can you give us an example of that? When you say creativity, what does that mean to you?
Sure. Yeah. So creativity, I think first and foremost, thinking that you don't have a sales catalog or playbook if you're in a consulting company, right? If the top 5% at my company and our competitive companies like us, the top 5% sellers probably come up with a deal that when you look at the blueprint actually doesn't really exist anywhere in your sales book, right? It has all the nuances and flavors of that customer, that addressable market, new and emerging technologies. So I think creativity and thinking outside of the box can be actually much more advantageous than prescriptive nature, right? And being able to sell repeatably, if that makes sense.
I take it you don't get a lot of inbound?
Not a ton of inbound. Yeah, we have to really go off of a big referral business in terms of our past book of business where we've sold and had customers be successful, and then a lot of partner and channel sales.
Yeah, because I'm kind of finding that today that everybody wants kind of a playbook, a script, a cadence, and they just want to hit buttons all day.
So it's fascinating. So I sell technology capability. I don't sell a product. I sell services only. So when we get sellers who come from big high-tech companies or big SaaS companies, I kind of scratch my head thinking, well, you've always been able to sell this big brand product where the time to value is very short. But at my company, which is pure consultative sales and services sales, there might be a long time to value. But in the end, the customer owns IP and they own the solution. They have economy of scale and it's bespoke to what they need. But that doesn't come easily, right?
Right. You can't demo the people. Right? I guess
exactly.
The way you can with a product, or I guess you could have reference calls and stuff. So how do you handle that? How do you build up that trust and differentiation between you and the alternatives?
Yeah, good question. So the best way to do it is to have obviously case studies and referenceable work, but as part of that, we like to think about our solutions in the form of for better or worse, accelerators, right? So if we've used artificial intelligence to optimize or automate something in whatever industry, let's say the energy industry, well, we know the general fingerprint of what made that successful. The nuances that differ customer to customer might be size and scale, might be type of data, might be the business workflow or logic, but generally we know how to do that. So what we're really selling to the next customer is how to do it a little quicker, a little faster, a little cheaper, a little bit better than the last time we did it as a consultant, right? So an accelerator for us might still be there might not be code behind it that we're selling, but there's a reference architecture, there's mocked up graphics of some type, right? There's something that they can still take to their business and say, would this help you out in your workflow?
Yeah. And do you partner with software companies, infrastructure companies to kind of leverage their, beachhead within the account?
Absolutely. Yes, that's a very big part of our business. If you're Microsoft or Salesforce or AWS or Google Cloud, you are a very big item on the customer spend sheet.
Yeah.
You, at the end of the day, sell infrastructure solutions. Infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, right? So the services angle that we bring is always integral. But we still have to, now I'm selling to multiple people, right? Now I'm selling to the cloud partner. Here's how you're going to make consumption revenue. I'm selling the customer business value. And actually more times than not, I'm selling internally to get my team excited about what I just sold.
Yeah, because it's like an ecosystem type sale.
Exactly.
Where you're not selling your autonomous service. Your autonomous service is connected to this ecosystem.
Yep, exactly. It's typically like the SI, systems integration, connective tissue type of sale.
And what's hard about it? Everything?
I think what's hard about it is what I love, which is kind of to my earlier point, that lack of defined playbook.
Yeah.
I would be bored out of my mind if I had like a catalog of SKUs I went out every day selling. So I do think that, I like the fact that every sale is different. Every customer is a little different. I also think that what's hard, also what's exciting, is that if we are able to get a customer to do a lot of things we do, it's something that likely could show up in like their 10K or their corporate OKRs and strategy, because we're the ones who help them adopt machine learning, right? Or we're the ones who help them adopt a data-driven approach to their ESG strategy, or, big, messy, complicated things.
And how'd you come up with this mindset? Was it natural, or did somebody say, no, don't be selling features and functions, be thinking about the big picture?
Yeah. I think, first of all, failing a lot is always helpful, right?
It's a good teacher, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, going back to the baseball analogy, it's like, if you fail 70% of the time, you make the Hall of Fame. Like it's an awkward mindset to adopt when you're 25 or 30 years old, right? I do think that trying to focus more on getting out in the field, failing a lot, seeing how, like in my case, my customers have the spectrum of, do I buy this solution as a product, right? Or do I build it from scratch? Building's always harder and messier. That's what we offer. So it also helps me by disqualifying right away a lot of other prospects. So that I think learning how to narrow the gap and understanding in your head what qualified really means is really, really helpful early on.
That's it, because they're looking at it build versus buy, or how much do they buy and how much do they integrate? Because they're not going to build everything. They're going to build some of it.
Right. Right.
How did you learn all that? Because that's a lot of your own capabilities, but the whole ecosystem, you have to have a little thread of understanding through the whole architecture.
One thing that really helped me was my first job, like I mentioned, was really more of a digital product company. We had I used to call it a marketplace product that we were selling. And I liked that, but what I decided was I want to get closer to, I have a buzzy term, but art of the possible, right? And I think getting closer to that for me meant consulting and services. I wanted to figure out a way to add more polish to my sales approach. So I took a little bit of a leap of faith when I moved here to Austin, and I worked with a pretty large India-based company, purely services. They had me on site, badged, consulting, selling inside of a Fortune 50 company, and selling business process improvement, which at the time I wasn't quite sure what that meant, but I accepted the role.
It's like digital transformation, right?
Yeah, a lot of intangible things. But that was a huge leg up for me in my career, because I had to get very, very, very deep into a very large multinational account. And just for 3 or 4 years straight, I was selling only white space inside that one account. And that helped me establish a lot of that polish. And I then thought, okay, well, this is how a Fortune 50 company thinks about business process improvement or optimization, automation. How do I go out to the rest of the addressable market, that most of which is not that big, and kind of dumb it down a little bit, right? Distill it down into things that are feel packaged that they can buy. That was a huge learning moment for me.
I love that, because I did that early in my career as well, where you were Onside badged, going to their meetings, trying to get people to use and think your way.
Mm-hmm.
You're part of the crew.
Right. If somebody wasn't signing my proposal, unfortunately for them, I showed up and tapped them on the shoulder behind their cube, right? It's very helpful.
Well, a lot of salespeople today don't get that experience, and they don't understand what happens after that 1-hour presentation and demo you give.
Which leads to a very good point. The best way to learn, I think, in B2B sales is to somehow establish a feedback loop in your sales process. And obviously easier said than done, right? You can't assure yourself that after your big pitch deck, you do get feedback, but there are strategies you can use, right? For example, in the beginning of a deal that you know is going to be qualified, you might suggest to the customer, here's what you're probably getting into when you're talking to me. This is probably going to be 3 to 4 months, and we're going to need an NDA, and I'm going to need to see some of your data. There's going to be moments where you feel like you're entering the trough of disillusionment, but bear with me, right? Because we've done this before, and I'm going to need recurring cadence of calls. I'm going to need to talk to your team members, and these feedback loops, I think, are very important.
It's critical. Otherwise, you're guessing.
Correct. Yeah, you get to the edge of some point where you've pushed your proposal, and then you're hoping, right?
Yeah. And checking in, and the discussions that are happening, you're not privy to.
Exactly.
Where when you're on site, you might not be in the meeting, but you can meet up for lunch or coffee with somebody who was in the meeting.
Right.
And if you're doing your job really well, they're inviting you to the parties on the weekend.
Yeah, and if you start your career in inside sales, for example, and it's a little bit more of a quantifiable goal, right? I do think that's valuable to somebody learning how to sell. But ultimately, yes, you got to find your way out to being an outdoor cat, right? You got to people and get the feedback loop of understanding. My proposal to automate this is supposed to do this. Sure, that makes you successful above the line, but like, what am I really helping you do? Am I helping you do something that is automated but frees up 80% of your team's time to do more compelling stuff? Does that make you get out of bed in the morning more excited, right? Does that help your guys feel like they're upscaling their careers? Because that's really, I think, in B2B, that's where the big sales are really made, right? That you got to understand both levels of outcomes.
And that's it. And if you're not there, the likelihood is just to put it onto the pile of good ideas to do someday.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right.
And what motivates you as a salesperson?
Yeah, good question. I guess I'm actually dealing with this concept right now because I've been fortunate to work for good companies and I've had great success as a salesperson quantifiably. I'm starting to realize as I get older, inevitably I care more and more about the success of those around me. Yeah. And the one thing I struggle with is, does that automatically mean that as a sales professional, I go into sales management? Maybe, maybe not, right? It's the same thing as software engineer at Salesforce has to grapple with. Just because I've become a great software engineer, do I get promoted until I manage software engineers? Or is that taking me out of the coding game where my most value is? So I'm working through the mental loops and hurdles of that right now, actually.
Yeah. And what would keep you in sales versus going into leadership? Have you managed people before? Do you know what that's like, or do you?
Seldomly at a small level. I think I just like winning. I love winning. I love the competition. I like being close to customers and understanding that what keeps them up at night, what makes them win. And I see it from our own leadership. Like if they catch me one-on-one, they're asking me more than I'm asking them. They're saying, well, what's going on with our customers? Where do you think we should be going? Right? What is keeping them up at night? And that pauses me because that makes me realize, again, going back to feedback loop, you have to have your top sellers helping drive your business based on your customers, right?
Yeah, because that type of sale, people don't come out of college and be able to do it.
Right. Right. It's interesting with the state of technology, right? I mean, ChatGPT has been all over the news for the last 3 or 4 months. And that has a lot of people, grandmothers, right, thinking about technology in a way they didn't think about it 3 months ago. And as a consulting company, when you go talk to a customer, they think a lot of the hard stuff is what we actually think is kind of the easy stuff. Like machine learning seems like this mystical, magical land. Not for a machine learning engineer that is only 26 and has grown up in a digital native world, right? The hard stuff is like change management, process change, like organizational agility, right? These like big, messy, open-ended things. So when I go talk to a customer, I have to help them understand the technology behind what you're asking. It's probably not the hard part, right? The people, process, tools equation, the people in the process is actually much harder than the tools in a lot of cases.
Well, the bigger the company, the harder change is.
Exactly. It's painful.
Yeah, because there's all these interdependencies that no one's seeing. That if you change this one thing, there's this ripple effect that happens.
Right.
And they've kind of learned not to change anything because it's going to break something. It always does.
Right. I mean, a lot of businesses could start leveraging ChatGPT right now, but they don't know how to. The technology's there, right? Yeah. But to understand what that actually means for their people, the way they monetize, the way they build things based on technology in their business that might make them more open to risk now if they're using things like this, right?
And what's the hardest part of your job?
Well, if I'm trying to sell to, let's say, a utility company, right? Utility company here in Texas, where I'm based. Utility company might have thousands of employees, multiple lines of business. And then there's the person there that I'm talking to. And then they're talking to soft serve, which is 14,000 people, but I'm there navigating what their company wants through one person, who in turn is talking to soft serve through one person. I think I spend most of my time and thought and stress making sure that that translation happens in the most clear, direct, impactful way.
Yeah.
They're essentially the cogs behind both what our companies are trying to do, which is great, right? It's exciting, but I need to make sure that all of that is being translated appropriately.
And where do your deals typically get stuck?
Two places. One would be something is cool and innovative and technologically driven, but doesn't map back to a need to have. It's a nice to have, at least on this year's budget, right? The other is sort of a co-opetition between our company and the other company we're trying to work with's internal development team and capability. And I need to make sure they understand that we're better and faster together. And we want to help them on one project and move on to the next project. We don't want to stick around and milk it, right?
Yeah, because in the first case, the science experiment or the, prototype.
Science experiment, yeah.
They're nice, but there's not much money in it. And if there's no business requirement behind it, it's a Skunk Works type thing. And it might take off someday. And then in the latter case, people feel you might be stepping on their toes.
Right.
And kind of augmenting them out of their role.
Absolutely right.
Yeah.
And that means, the latter ends up presenting its ugly head usually too late if I haven't managed that, right? That kind of kills your deal without knowing your deal is dead.
Yeah, because they hamstring you when you're not there.
Right.
Have you found a particular way to prevent that?
I think part of it is managing the pre-sale process with top down and bottom up, both in mind.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is sort of, first of all, broadening the group of stakeholders that are involved in it is very helpful. I think a lot of salespeople in B2B sales focus, of course, up high. I want to sell to the CEO. It's like, well, I don't really want to talk to the CEO actually, unless I have a reason and something to say, right? Because the CEO gets in the room, they turn to the next guy.
What do you think?
Yeah. The next guy. And usually it's a problem, not an opportunity that comes out of it. But I think, bottom up is really important too, right? Because I want to make sure there's a role assigned to everybody in this story, from the data engineer all the way up to the vice president who's engaging with, say a line of business on something we're trying to accomplish. And for my side, that's also mapping like for like, right? They bring a very technical person. Great, I'll bring my very technical person. If they bring somebody who's talking about change management, I'll bring my change management consultant, right? So I think all those pieces flowing together like a little stratego board versus not having that like for like mapping during the pre-sale.
And what are the red flags that you found that you've gotten pretty far down the road, but you're getting the sense that it's not going to close? I got to imagine, given the amount of investment you've made, you've developed a way of sensing that.
Yes, I would say it's really about, it's going back to that concept of nice to have versus need to have.
Yeah.
And if you're dealing with a larger company, obviously they deal with pretty formalized budgeting cycles, and prioritization goes into that. And I start to get a sense of, is this something that was sort of pitched internally on my customer side that was accepted as a cool idea, but not prioritized into this year's budget. That's why I really try very hard to understand upfront what their buying process is. And this is a little bit of a vague statement, but I try to tell my team internally that let's get them to have their buying process adhere to the way we want to sell, instead of selling based on the way they want to buy. And that sets everything up pretty well from the beginning if we can get the former and not the latter.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And have you been able to take something that that is a nice to have and convert it to a must have?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, one that comes to mind is, in the realm of data science and artificial intelligence. We do work with a company who has, they're a big company, they're industry specific. They have a problem that a lot of companies have, which is they've spent the last 30, 40 years investing a ton in very high salaries for these subject matter experts, people that have PhDs, people that have years, decades of experience doing a very discrete subject matter specific process for their business. We've helped them learn how to apply AI to that corporate knowledge base so that it can continue being a benefit for them in the future, even after this group of folks start to retire, or software starts to redefine the way that group of people does their job. So that's helping this type of company not only retain top talent and attract top talent, because you're getting people who never had to interact with software to now feel enabled by software, but you're also helping them think about even maybe commercializing this type of technology. And that's something that started as a science fair project, but has become a longstanding relationship.
And how do you separate yourself and your company so that you're not viewed as a commodity?
As a salesperson, or in terms of my company?
Your own style, because the natural thing is, oh, well, we've been working with X company for years. They've got a guy who knows this, right? I'm sure you've heard that.
Yeah. It's all, in my line of work, it's very, very, very relationship driven. So I don't become a commodity because I'm the feedback loop between my company and the market we want to sell to.
Yeah.
I know where they're going. I know how they're spending their money, or how they're thinking about spending their money. I think at the company level, we don't allow ourselves to be commoditized because we continually reimagine the way that our core product can be bought. Our core product is just people, engineering hours. But you have to continually up-level the way that is perceived and purchased by a customer.
Cool. Hey, I really appreciate your time today. Where can people go to connect and follow you?
Sure. Yeah, I'm active on LinkedIn. And like I said, our company SoftServe is at www.softserveinc.com. And I can also be contacted through the website channel. So